Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hawaii Hemp Task Force meeting. I'm June Tulio, Hemp Program Specialist from the state of Hawaii, Department of Agriculture. Prior to call to order, Stephen Dalton will inform the public how to participate in this hybrid meeting, which can be accessed by video conference, telephone, or in person.
Good afternoon, everyone. For internet, telephone, and in-person access, when testifying, you will be asked to identify yourself and the organization, if any, that you represent. Each testifier will be limited to 2 minutes of testimony per agenda item. If internet and phone connection is lost, the meeting may reconvene when either audiovisual communication or audio-only communication is established within 30 minutes. The public may access the reconvene meeting by clicking the link that you used to join or calling one of the numbers provided also in the agenda. If it is not possible to reconvene the meeting within 30 minutes after an interruption, then check the agency's website for information as to whether the meeting will be continued to an alternative date and time, or the meeting may be terminated. For any of the attendees who are, as an attendee, your microphone will be automatically muted during the meeting unless you are providing testimony. For each agenda item you wish to testify on, please click the raise hand button found on your Zoom screen. The task force will individually enable each testifier to unmute their microphone. When recognized by the task force meeting facilitator, please unmute your microphone before speaking and mute your microphone after you finish speaking in order to prevent audio feedback. I don't see anyone joining by phone, but just in case, if in the future, when the task force meeting facilitator asks for public testimony, you may indicate you want to testify by entering the star and then 9 on your phone's keypad. After entering star and then 9, a voice prompt will let you know that the host of the meeting has been notified. When recognized by the meeting facilitator, you may unmute yourself by pressing star and then 6 on your phone. A voice prompt will let you know that you are unmuted. Once you are finished speaking, please enter star and 6 again to mute yourself. I believe that's it.
Thank you, Stephen. Just a reminder that testifiers are limited to 2 minutes on each agenda item and must address items on the agenda only. So in addition, may we request the task force members that your camera should be visible and that you have your videos turned on throughout the meeting. Thank you. So I'd like to call the meeting of the task force to order at 12:06 on Friday, July 12, 2024. Moving on, I will take a roll call. I request the task force members to please acknowledge and say present when your name is called. So the task force includes Gloria Ilagan of Mauna Kea Trading Company, Hawaii Island Rep and Cannabinoid Sector Rep. Next is Brittany Neal, owner of the Hawaiian Hempstead, also a Hawaii Island member and a Cannabinoid Sector Rep.
Present.
Rusty Top, owner and operator of the Kamaina Ventures, also a Hawaii Island member and a cannabinoid sector rep.
Present.
So next is Tai Chang, president of Hemp Hawaii. Is an Ohio licensed member and DOH processor licensee and also a cannabinoid sector representative. So next is Kyle Leong, owner of Hawaii Gold Farms and Oahu member and all sector representative.
Present.
Chin Lee, professor of the University of Hawaii, Center for Tropical Agriculture and Human Resources, Ohio member and building and cannabinoid sector representative.
That's the.
Mr. Matsuda, manager of Polele, Ohio member and building, general fiber and cannabinoid sector representative.
Present.
Grant Overton, co-founder and CEO of Agripelago, Ohio member and fuel, grain, food, and cannabinoid sector representative.
Present.
Scotty Wong, CEO of Ohana Hui Ventures and Oahu member and all sector rep.
Present.
Robert Benz of Hawaii Sustainable Farms, Maui licensed producer and all sector representative.
Present.
Janine Holstein, owner and founder of Maui Majesty, Maui USDA licensed member and DOH licensed processor and cannabinoid sector representative.
Present.
Jediah McRoberts, president of Kauai Hemp Company, Kauai licensed producer and DOH processor licensee and cannabinoid sector representative.
Present.
Liliana Napoleon, owner of Napoleon Gentry, a Molokai licensed producer and all sector rep.
Here, present.
Gail Baber, president of Hawaii Royal Hemp and Hawaii Hemp Farmers Association and all sector representative.
Present.
Jared Dalgamoni, CEO of Hawaiian Choice and HHFA director, cannabinoid sector representative.
Present.
Joe Smith of Hemp Home Hawaii, building sector representative. Kelly King, vice president of Pacific Biodiesel Technologies, building and fuel sector representative. Lastly, Greg Smith, owner of Earth Matters and HHFA director, building and cannabinoid sector representative. Thank you. A quorum is established.
There's somebody has two names.
I was just gonna ask, there's a second person using Gail Vern Faber. If I could maybe move that second person as an attendee
No,
or
just
Yeah,
one.
the one
Gail,
that's speaking right now in that highlighted box is me. I don't know what the other one is.
I also could not unmute myself. I'm Ching Lee at the UH Manoa.
Okay.
Finally, I made it.
Thank you. Is there anyone from the public who is attending?
there are two members from the public. They're both calling in by phone.
Mhm.
Were you wanting them to say?
Yeah, so please state their name and affiliation.
Okay, the first person that I'd like to, that's an attendee that I would ask to unmute, is the number ending in 3300. And a reminder to unmute yourself, you would do star and then 6.
Thank you. So Joseph Smith,
I think that's Greg Smith that's on the
Greg
phone
Smith.
number.
Greg Smith, not Joe. Okay, so Greg Smith. Yeah. Thank you, Megan. So we'll move to our next agenda, which is the overview of the Act 26.
I was gonna say, there is a second number, but I don't know, these are just numbers of the public. You don't need to call.
Yeah, no,
Joe Smith is here. June,
yes.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm late.
it's okay. Thank you, Joe. Mhm. So a quorum is established. So we'll move to the next item in our agenda, which is the overview of the Act 263, Session Laws of Hawaii 2023. At this time, I would like to turn over to our Deputy Attorney General, Andrew Goff, to give the overview of the Act 263 SLH 2023.
Hey, folks, my name's Andrew Goff. I'm a Deputy Attorney General. I represent Department of Health, and I'm assisting with the task force here. I'm going to go over briefly what Act 263 entails, only relating to the task force itself. And I know you folks are probably already familiar with this, so I'm going to try to be as simple and short as possible. Part 3 of Act 263 sets up the joint task force. It calls on the Department of Agriculture and Department of Health to jointly convene a task force, but this is an industry task force. So this is you folks deciding what the industry needs. Department of Agriculture and Department of Health is here for administrative assistance. So the task force is legally created, and you're tasked with giving a report to the legislature, and that report contains recommendations. So what that means for you folks is that sunshine law applies to this task force. We're going to go over later in the next agenda item, specifically what that sunshine law means and how that relates to you folks. But in general, during this discussion, just keep in mind that for task force purposes, once we look at what the scope of the task force is, all of the discussions that are had by task force members about the scope need to be publicly noticed and in view of the public. So we'll go over a little bit more what that means, and I'll kind of work that through this talk. Initially DOA and DOH are there here for administrative capabilities. Part of that means if you have communications that you want to send to other task force members, you should go through DOA for that, especially if you're copying the entire task force. So emails do count as discussions. So if you want to inform the task force, send that email to DOA. DOA can distribute that to the full task force. You folks, as the task force members, are in charge of doing all the discussions, coming up with actual recommendations and voting on them, and then coming up with a report to give to the legislature. Now, the scope of the task force, what we refer to as the task force business, is in Part B, in Part 3. And that says the task force shall work with a third-party consultant to identify the infrastructure needs of Hawaii hemp farmers, work with NED to streamline and harmonize definitions of regulations, and to develop an outline of farmer and industry needs and the strategies and actions that can help inform public policy concerning the hemp industry. Now, that's a very, very broad mandate for you folks. So just keep that in mind when we're talking about sunshine laws later. That is the scope of your business. So any kind of conversation that you are having with task force members regarding that large scope, regarding infrastructure, regarding really any strategies regarding hemp in the state, pretty much, that needs to be in view of the public. So C, the task force may request data information from additional sources, including but not limited to hemp economists, regulators in other states, retailers, farmers, and hemp industry groups. Again, this has sunshine implications. If the task force members want to discuss with a additional source, and the whole task force wants to be in on that discussion, it has to be publicly noticed and it has to be in view of the public. So if you want to call on a hemp economist, that discussion should be on an agenda and you should do it at one of these meetings. The other thing that you can do is an individual task force member can reach out and gather the data themselves and then report it at the public meeting. So D outlines the task force members and the proportions of the industry that are there. We went over that with the roll call of what everybody's role is, and there will be a document put online that outlines all of that. E is a third-party consultant. So DOA went and hired a third-party consultant. This consultant is tasked with identifying infrastructure needs of Hawaii hemp. So their report and their recommendations will be focused on the infrastructure needs. So that essentially is, do you folks need a corticator? Where should that corticator be? Should it be mobile or fixed? What's kind of the plan for aggregating hemp and making it industrial? If you are cannabinoid folks, do you need processing facilities? Same thing, mobile, fixed. What kind of processing facilities do you need? And those are the recommendations that the consultant is going to come up with. And then the task force after that is tasked with coming up with their own recommendations. So you are not bound by the consultant's recommendations. You can change them, amend them pursuant to the task force discussion and any task force decision that you finally make. You can also have other discussions on other recommendations you want to make and include those in the final report. No member of the task force shall be subject to Chapter 84, and you shall serve without a compensation. That basically just means you are not state employees, so that law doesn't apply to you. And the task force shall dissolve on August 30th, 2024. That's important to know. That is the drop dead date. We can't extend that beyond that. So any task force discussion that is had has to be had before August 30th, 2024. Any recommendations that you want to make need to be confirmed by the task force and voted on by August 30th, 2024. So that essentially is your job and your role. Insofar as what is coming, my understanding is that the consultants have been working on gathering data and information on the infrastructure recommendations. They've also been listening to discussions and gathering information on some other recommendations. The plan is to, at a future meeting, have them present those recommendations, and then the task force can discuss those recommendations, make amendments to those recommendations, vote those recommendations up and down. And if the task force wants to engage other additional sources, if they want to talk about other recommendations, then we can do that also in future meetings. So that essentially is the task force's role and the scope of your duties. If you have any questions, you can ask them now, or we can move on to a more comprehensive overview of the sunshine.
Is there a testimony from the public?
The public has no hands raised.
Any questions from the task force members? If not, we will move to the next item in the agenda, which is the overview of the Sunshine Law, the requirements for public meetings. So I'd like to turn over to Deputy Attorney General Travis Moon, who will be explaining to us what are the requirements of Sunshine Law and how it affects the task force.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Travis Moon. I represent the Department of Agriculture. I'm also assisting with advising the task force. So I just wanted to give you all a brief overview of the Sunshine Law because Sunshine Law does apply to this task force and to you as task force members. It's going to be a kind of brief overview. Don't want to, overwhelm too much, but there's a lot of guidance and good materials on the website of Information Practices. The Office of Information Practices website. So I encourage you to check out their website and take a look at their open meetings guide to the Sunshine Law. And if you have any specific questions, you can also reach out to me directly, or you can ask them at this meeting. So Sunshine Law is Hoy's open meetings law, and it's going to govern the way this task force has to conduct its business. So meetings are required to be open and available to the public to allow the public to testify and discuss agenda items of the meeting. So the task force was created by the state legislature under Act 263. And the scope of the task force is to gather data and information to understand industry needs and inform strategies and actions that support agriculture and a robust hemp industry in the state. So all matters of the task force need to relate to this purpose. So task force meetings need to follow an agenda that is publicly posted at least 6 days before such a meeting. And what the agenda does is it lists all the business that the task force is considering at that meeting. So all discussion needs to revolve around the agenda items. And public testimony also must be allowed for each agenda item. For any action of the task force to be valid, the Sunshine Law is going to require a majority of all the members to which the task force is entitled to approve such an action. And okay, so as members of the task force, you're required to follow the requirements of Sunshine Law. I guess the main one is going back to the purpose of what Sunshine Law is. It's to have open meetings and open discussions with the public. So it kind of restricts certain actions between members. So it generally prohibits members from discussing task force business, whether it's email, phone, or in person, outside of a public meeting. So discussions about task force business needs to happen at a task force meeting. But there are a few exceptions to this. So 2 members may discuss task force business outside of a meeting as long as no commitment to a vote is made or sought, and the 2 members do not constitute a quorum, which doesn't apply here. And this communication cannot be a serial communication. So what this means is that you cannot discuss the same task force business with that one person with other members of the task force, and then keep having a serial conversation with all members of the task force individually. The next would be the task force can designate 2 or more task force members, but less than the majority of quorum to investigate matters concerning board business. So the task force members, if investigative committee is put together, they would need to report to the task force of their findings and recommendations at the next properly noticed meeting. Another allowed interaction would be if 2 or more task force members, but less than the number of members that constitute a quorum, They may attend conferences or conventions, like informational presentations or meetings that relate to task force business. Only if that event is not specifically organized for the task force members. And if you do attend such a meeting, you would need to notify the other task force members of your attendance and the matters discussed, all done at the next properly noticed meeting. And I think lastly, well, not lastly, but I think what could be applicable to this task force may be an executive session. So an executive session is a closed meeting to the public. It's considered a closed meeting to the public, and it's limited to certain reasons, but maybe the most applicable here would be for legal advice from board counsel. So from either me or Andrew, and questions, well, I guess matters of executive sessions need to be pertaining to legal matters or legal questions, you know, such as the task force's liability, their duties, and their privileges or immunities. Yeah, I think that's it, unless you have any other questions. And if you don't have any questions now, you can always reach out to me via email or phone.
Is there a testimony from the public?
The public has no hands raised at this time.
And if there's no additional, no questions from the task force, we will move on to the next agenda. So the next item is the appointment of the meeting facilitator. As explained earlier by our Deputy Attorney General, Andrew Goff, DOA and DOH were tasked by Act 263 to jointly convene this task force. So as the hemp program specialist for HDOA, I have been in charge with communicating and coordinating with you, hemp farmers, the hemp industry players, including our hemp consultants, to set up this Hawaii Hemp Task Force. My responsibilities include preparing and putting up public notices, posting the agenda, presentations including video recordings, and setting up the meeting and coordinating with the IT to ensure a smooth meeting and other things. Since the last 3 meetings, I have been acting as your meeting facilitator. Your role as members is to make a decision for the task force. So in this regard, I would like to continue volunteering to be the meeting facilitator for this task force. If there is no objection, I, June Tulio, would be happy to carry on as the meeting facilitator for this task force. If there is someone from the public who wishes to give testimony,
There are no raised hands.
if not, we will proceed to the next business. So the next item in the agenda is the approval of the May 17, 2024, June 14, 2024, and June 2024 task force meetings. This is to inform you, the task force members, that video recordings and meeting summaries for May 17, June 14, and June 21 were already posted in the DOA as well as the DOH websites. Therefore, approval is no longer necessary. If there's no testimony and no questions from the task force, we will move on to the next agenda. So the next item for today is the presentation by Task Force Oahu member Scotty Wong and his partners regarding hemp seed cultivars, the growing of hemp seed, of hemp harvesting, baling, the corticator, hemp products, financials, including support. So I would like to turn over to Scotty Wong of Ohana Hui Ventures. So his presentation will be followed by Kim Phillips of Hemp Traders, and then by Alex Wu and Terry Moran of Kanda Hemp Seeds.
Okay, thank you, June. Hello, everybody. This is Scotty Wong, Ohana Hui Ventures. And also I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Friends of Waimanalo, which is our nonprofit 501c3 workforce development arm. And I think on the call today, we have our executive director, which is Scotty Reese Moniz, who I've mentioned before in other calls, that kind of started us all off on hemp in our company and for our workforce development. But I do want to apologize, June. I did have a presentation, but right now we're currently giving a class on laser rust removal systems here. Some of the first in Hawaii and the first classes. So, but that's part of our workforce development. But as far as my presentation today, I want to keep it short because I get turned over to my partners. But it's preaching to the choir here. Everybody knows about hemp, how important it is, how much we need it here in Hawaii. I just want to get some key sound bites across to the Department of Ag. Is that one of the main things us for hemp farmers that we need, all of us, is funding. We all look for our own funding. We're all searching for our own funding, whether it's by grants or loans or investments. But if the state can figure out a way to do grant funding for us, specifically for Hawaii hemp farmers, I think that would be key to really sparking this industry in Hawaii. The second one is land. Land is key. Currently, I have 430 acres from the state ADC. 40% of that land mass that we have is scheduled to be for industrial hemp growing. We put in for some more lands on Kauai. Right now, we're waiting for the application process. But you know what we're looking at in our operation is anywhere between 2,000 and 5,000 acres of hemp to be grown on all islands in the state of Hawaii. Because when you look at the processing, and we'll get into the processing side of the products that we want to make, whether it's fuel, bedding, hempcrete, when you start doing the math, you need a lot of hemp to be grown. And that's something that my partners will be talking about very shortly. And then the other thing that is key, which will end my talk with this to pass it on, is our workforce development education. So what we do is we have a teachable moment every step of the way in our farming, whether it's basic agriculture with soil health, propagation of fruits and vegetable plants, all the way to growing industrial hemp. So all of that is education, and we usually do that through our nonprofit arm, which we do have an academy for industrial hemp growing. So that's pretty much the key points that I wanted to get across in my talk. And I do want to really quickly introduce my partner on the workforce development side. He's the executive director, president of Friends of Waimanalo, our nonprofit, Scotty Reese Moniz. I mentioned him before. He was the one that started one of the very first industrial hemp conventions several years ago. So Scotty, if you're available, just to introduce yourself and say a few words about our hemp workforce development.
Aloha. Aloha, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing us to be a part of this great team and mission for helping out the state of Hawaii and the industry itself. We are excited about being part of, wish to be on the ground floor of creating and building and training everyone for this army of industry trying to create. And because this is a new but old industry, we want to make sure that it all grows at the same time and that we can be successful in this. So we're super excited about this partnership with Kanda, Ohana Hui Ventures, all of you in the state. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we can go to Kim right now, and she'll introduce herself and her proper company that she's with.
Kim, if you could unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Hello, my name's Kim Phillips. I actually am the owner of Plan It Hemp, PLAN dash IT Hemp. I'm not I am friends with hemp traders, but I do not work for hemp traders, and I don't want you to be confused that I represent them in any way. My apologies for that. I am a hemp advocate and have been for over the past decade. I was one of the first licensed growers in Montana and one of the first members on the hemp advisory committee for the state of Montana. So I appreciate your panel and the good work that you're trying to do. I have built a hempcrete home in Montana. I have imported hemp. I have grown hemp. I have my goal is end industrial uses for hemp and how to get the production so that you have a quality product to make end products and make it to the shelf, such as MDF board, compostable, tableware, plates, papers, pallets, things of this nature, that hemp is right to help be an influence, interrupter, like from just straight lumber and wood. It doesn't just need to be lumber, or it can be a combination of both. I had a little presentation, but I don't have access to it right now, and I super apologize for that. I'm currently imported some equipment from the mainland and am working on Scotty's farm to develop these end product uses so people can see them and get familiar with the different projects that we're doing out on the farm and that hemp can do for Hawaii. Do you have any questions? I'm not sure from that.
Yeah, we could save questions for the end, but just to be clear, yeah, Kim was growing for a while in Montana, and she saw what we're doing here in Hawaii and upped and moved, and she lives here in Hawaii right now, mainly for our hemp industry that we're trying to build. And then finally, our partners, which they'll thoroughly introduce themselves, is Alex Wu and Terry Moran from Kanda Hemp. Go ahead, Alex.
Hey guys, big thanks to our partner Scotty Rismones, Kim, and the committee for inviting us here. Thank you, June, Leo. I have a presentation to share with you guys regarding fiber and grain hemp. Share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, our name is Kanda Hemp Seeds. Our mission is to empower hemp growers with premium seed and solution. Today, I'll be presenting along with our sales director, Terry Moran. So a little bit more about us, who we are. We are a fiber and grain seeds and equipment solution provider. Our mission is to grow fiber hemp to be able to support a sustainable future and various industries for the sustainable future. In order to do that, we have to make hemp cultivation and processing very accessible and profitable for hemp growers. And these are some of the photos of our genetic all over the US. As you can see, there's a hemp house there that is built with the hemp herd from our variety Yuma in the tribal area in Minnesota. So we're very excited to show you why hemp is one of the answers. So why fiber hemp? Why the crop? Because I'm sure most of you know, as today, the world is converging towards a sustainable material solution. According to McKinsey, about 20% of our entire material value chain accounts for 20% of global greenhouse gas emission. And hemp, as a very unique and extremely versatile crop that can make many kind of product, is very, very practical and scalable for this world we need today. And of course, it's one of the fastest carbon sink in the world. It does about 6 tons of carbon sequestration per acre. Anybody can, it's an estimate, a range, anybody can adjust my numbers. And here's a breakdown of fiber hemp pots. There's a great photos I like from our Dr. David Shuchoff from NC State University, who we work closely with. This shows you kind of the parts of the fiber hemp that we really focus on, which is the bast fiber, which is that green skin, the bast layer of the stalk. And then inside the woody part is the hurd, which accounts for 80% of the stalk, and the bast accounts for about 20% of the stalk. And of course, you have on top of the plant, you have the grain that you can harvest. And to kind of break down the bast fiber even more, you have about 10% long fibers or 10% short fiber, depending the way you process it. But remember, this key rule is that you can always go from long to short, but you cannot go from short fiber back to long fiber. So it's very important that we'll get to that. And so because of the parts that we just talked about, there's a massive end product market that we have that you can make from these parts. Like the product that Kim just mentioned, and many, many more. So there's textile industry, which is one of the biggest, going for sustainable, renewable material, textile material. There's composite materials, construction, hempcrete material is a big one. And then we know there's people on Maui are already building hemp houses to show that, to prove that. It's a massive industry. And this, of course, food. It's a $5 billion hemp food specifically. It will become a $5 billion industry. And of course, biofuel from the grain source. So these are just some of the example industry that we see as very, very prominent for the hemp itself. But what is stopping fiber hemp from really growing in the US, in the world, or even especially in Hawaii? I think it's really boils down to 3 factors. The first one is seed. There's a lack of very viable seed that will grow in the southern subtropical region of the United States. So for example, the photo here was in North Carolina, where some growers taken some northern variety seeds and planted in North Carolina, and fiber hemp only grew up to 3 foot tall. And that's not really fiber hemp, and that started to flower. So it's very important to find the best variety that can adapt to the climate. And of course, hemp seeds right now are very expensive because there's no end-to-end contract, there's no market very developed. So this will have to change. And the second one is equipment deficiencies, of course. There's definitely a way, knowledge base to process fiber hemp, and specifically for that performance. So depending on how you bale it, how you harvest it, it could really impact the value of the crop. And as you can see on the left-hand side, that bales is not as uniform. It's not really, it will be hard to process into very great long fiber, which is more valuable, like the picture on the right. And of course, to be able to have equipment is very, very high investment, very high risk. So which requires millions of dollars for one large-scale decorticator. And that's very difficult for people to get in to be accessible. So lastly, and of course, when there's no processing plants, people cannot make products from hemp. And in order to make products from hemp, people also have to develop the end products that you can make from hemp. So in Hawaii, I think the landscape is very different. There are more smaller scale individual farmers. That is very important to consider for a large scale row crop like hemp. So some of the solution that we see at Counter Hemp is, I think for Hawaii to really be able to target some of the key local markets you guys have, affordable housing, hemp home is the #1 market. Biofuel, biomaterial, renewable energy is extremely important because I was in Hawaii once and I remember a hurricane came and then everything went out. So I think that having the energy source is very, very important, and that's the future of biomaterials and fuels. Tourism, of course, one of the biggest industries, having food, tourism, applicator product, animal bedding, and feed. It's also a great market that can really low-hanging fruit for the industry. So to capture this market, you really have to be able to confirm with the mainstream market what they need, what kind of spec of the material can become a replacement for their current product. So that's between the processors and the end product buyer, the off-takers, to really decide, because sometimes a short fiber cannot be used in a long fiber setting, for example. And that becomes what kind of equipment can you really start, low input equipment that you can start to pilot and jumpstart the hemp processing to be able to really nail down the spec. So I think lower cost, smaller scale equipment to jumpstart the industry will be very important. And of course, at the end, seed. You want to make sure that the variety can be catered to the application. And by variety catered to the application, there's actually a very specific breakdowns of the variety itself as well for fiber. So as you can see, these are some of the key attributes we look at in a variety. And these are some of our Yuma variety and Hane. These are the biomass variety, we kind of call them, because they can become, you can grow them and let them grow for very, very dense biomass. There will be a lot of herb production in the stock itself. But as you can imagine, the fiber for this kind of variety will not be as fine as Egyptian cotton as the other type of textile fiber varieties, as you can see in the middle photo here. So these are they're much thinner, pencil thin, and the fiber quality are a lot nicer. So these are very valued in the textile industry. So there's a two difference between the fiber seed types we look at. And then of course there's a grain purpose varieties, which is it produces a lot of grain, and you get to have, after you combine the grain, you can harvest the fiber at the stalk as well. So really to show that, in Hawaii, fiber hemp is possible. Our partners, Ohana Hui Ventures and Friends of Waimanalo, really we begin the first, fiber hemp field from seed to market pilot field this June. So, we met in the beginning, Scotty and us, we met in the beginning and we talked about this for pretty much almost a year. And now we have identified what we want to do with the field, what variety. And I think I will let Terry, our sales director, take it from here to just explain. Terry?
Yes, am I muted?
No anymore.
So yes, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone for having us here as well. And just to tell you a little bit about myself, I have a degree in agronomy. I've worked in the seed industry my entire career, and I can appreciate the regulatory folks on the call. I worked in the Colorado Department of Ag hemp regulatory program for 3.5 years. So I've basically been on both ends of the industry starting back in 2015. So yeah, so working with the Scotties here, we have a nice little test plot going. We just started this back a couple weeks ago. It's approximately 1.5 acres, and we originally put this in with the idea of just seeing what time of year hemp would do well. There's a lot of agronomy work to be done to dial in, not only the stability of the varieties like in the chat, but also, what slot is going to work. We're thinking about dual purpose here with grain as well as fiber. So we basically, since it is such a small plot, we just purchased this little push planter, which is relatively inexpensive. Probably wouldn't want to do too many acres with that, but it can be mounted on a 3-point hitch. So, I mean, it worked fine for our purposes. And we've got a few beds planted here. What we did was planted 6 rows per bed. It's a very high population. We're looking at a basic fiber population. So hopefully this will work out for us and we'll learn quite a bit. Across the field, we changed densities just to check the plant performance, plant height, planting at the solstice with the days getting shorter, and also to check branching to see what kind of grain production we could get out of it. So on the agronomy side, we did have soil tested. The soil required quite a bit of amendments, and for the pH was very low. So you're trying to pick the pH up, add some fertilizer, and we'll see what we get. And if it's encouraging results, we're going to try to do more work here. I don't know if we'd go hemp on hemp in a particular fields. I don't want to start out building up pest pressure, but we have a lot to learn, and this is just the first step on that. As far as hemp production in general goes, from the Canada side, we still are in a regulated environment, and Hawaii, I know is part of the USDA, and unless Hawaii has their own laws that are more strict than the USDA actually has very nice laws compared to in the early days. So now, even though it's still regulated at 0.3, you're allowed remediation up to 0.9. So generally, we don't have a problem with anybody growing fiber or herd. It's generally you'd only run into a problem if you try to go for grain or if you get a little greedy on the herd. But in general, we ask all of our people to sample early at the first sign of rudimentary male flowers developing. It's time to get your sampling lined up. Sometimes that takes a couple of weeks, and then usually at that point, we're compliant. It's not an issue, and then they're allowed to cut it down 30 days later. And I can tell you, a lot of places in the country, as long as you have an early test that's compliant, the government is kind of like, they're not going all over the middle of everywhere to make sure you're cutting it down. But you need to know your regulatory environment, because there are places where if you don't have your crop cut down in 30 days, even though you're leaving the flower in the field, they're out there getting another sample. And we don't want anyone to have any problems with compliance. So, but you don't have a strike against you unless you're at 1% or above. And so far, we are not having a problem staying below 0.9. So we'll say that, and that's a good thing. And we are the largest suppliers across the Southeast and the Southwest. There's a lot of acres of hemp. I'm guessing right now across the mainland, probably somewhere between 15,000, maybe 20,000 acres just of hemp for fiber. And then there's probably another 12, maybe 15 for grain or dual purpose. So as far as growing hemp goes, all the literature will tell you you want a well-drained, fine, loamy soil. And that's not what we have in Hawaii. We have a very high clay, I think it was 78%. And if the soil stays wet, and there's other issues with nutrients being tied up, it's all going to be a big learning curve. If you're not trying to grow organically, and even in regenerative situations, there is the herbicide from Gowan Chemical Company, Sonalan, which is available in most states now for grass seedlings. I don't know if it's labeled for Hawaii or not, or if it's anything anybody would even be interested in, but as far as most of our planting region, that is what we recommend for people. Field selection is imperative. You have to have a nice field that's had crops in it. It's well cultivated, and hemp is just like any other crop. It needs to be taken care of. You can't just go out and throw the seed on the ground and expect some dynamite yield if you don't take care of it properly. So in most parts of the region, everybody's pushing the season. They want to get ahead of the weed seeds. So you're planting on the early end for your soil temperatures. And hemp, especially these subtropical Canada varieties, they work very well even in the later slots. And we do have people trying later slots right now, still planting up until July, across the mainland. The northern tier states, they've been looking at following wheat, so they're double cropping, and that's happening in the Southeast as well. So that makes it a little easier to justify hemp for a lot of people, because it's not just one season and one crop, right? Just like in California, if you're following wheat and you come in on hemp, now you're getting two crops off of the same piece of land. So for planting depth in our trial here, we planted barely under the soil surface, probably a quarter to half an inch deep. I don't like deep plantings. If you know your soil, you can get away with planting hemp to 2 inches deep, but you have more problems that way, especially if you want the crop to jump up out of the ground. I don't like to see seed on top of the ground, or you generally a quarter inch to 3/4 of an inch would be the sweet spot. So so when you're deciding how to plant hemp, you know, and it all comes down to the end purpose, right? So there are different ways to plant, and depending on what your targeted goal is, if you're just going for herd and biomass, you know, some people are planting like that one picture that showed the hand with the huge stalk, you know, about 3 or 4 inches, about 3 inches in diameter. You know, you can do that too at a very low population, but in general, most people are targeting somewhere between 350,000 to 500,000 plants per acre, or somewhere between 600 or 650, 700,000 up to 1 million. And that's again, you know, 70% of the plant is going to be herd, 20 to 30% is going to be bass fiber, 60 to 70, 80% is going to be herd. There's going to be a little bit of waste in there. So depending on what you're going for, if you're going for fine fiber, that's where you need this super high population, which really has been more experimental thus far, to my knowledge, across most areas. So again, for harvest, we would recommend cutting it down at about the first sign of males to like peak pollination of the males. This is dioecious varieties, so the males are usually a week to 10 days ahead of the females. So if you have a field that's full bloom, pollination of males, you probably want to cut it down if you're going for fine fiber. If you're going for herd, the herd is the last thing to develop in the plant. And the longer that crop sits out there, the more herd development you get. So that's all, you know, that's all yield and tons per acre and economic return. So as far as grain goes, you know, on these varieties, because you have such a large plant, and in the dual purpose varieties that you have a large plant, you do need to harvest them at a little higher moisture content. And it's all about how much plant material you're running through your combine. There are, you know, Canadian varieties and northern varieties that are only about, you know, 2.5 to 4 feet tall. And in those varieties, they can cut those things brown, but they're not taking any plant matter through their combine. They're just taking the seed heads. And you know, that works pretty well with short material, but that stuff is not anything that would be adapted to Hawaii. So our varieties, you'd have to harvest them at a higher moisture content, and then it'd be all about managing the moisture after harvest, get them down to about 8% to store the grain. And yeah, I would say we don't know yet about the yields, but I could assume probably 800 to 1,000 pounds per acre is what we'd be hoping for in a grain dual purpose crop. And if we had a way to have the plants branch more and, you know, be more top heavy with branching, and a way to economically harvest that, and that could probably be double just with the side branching seed production. Then as far as the fiber varieties, you know, yields, I would say, you know, two tons on the low end and up to 6 tons if it's managed properly is probably a realistic number for most of these varieties. But we've got a long ways to go to figure it all out. So I will say that. So again, on your business model and the hemp parts and the marketing and all that, if you look across the mainland states, the areas that we're selling seed in now, hemp bales, there's a lot of bales sitting around from last year, and there's a lot of bales that get sold for a lower price, and that demonstrates the lower end of the market. A lot of that stuff was grown for grain. It wasn't necessarily handled that well, and they're small plants to begin with. But anytime anybody harvests grain, they still want to get the stubble off of the field because it's kind of hard on the next crop. So they'll take it off, and then those become available a lot for animal bedding, but not necessarily the highest grade animal bedding. So that's why you see the low end there at about a dime, $200 for contracted bales, and then up to $350 a ton, just in different regions. The people that are paying the premium price are people that have invested in the equipment. So they have a need for feedstock immediately because they have investors and they have their machinery now, and they have to have that machinery operating. So they're paying a premium for the product now, probably with the idea that as it scales and they get thousands of acres and they get more growers on board, because it's still a chore to recruit growers, that those prices will probably come down. But that also ties into the next slide, the next half of this slide, which is, what are the end uses of the product, right? So we do represent an equipment line, and if you're doing on-farm growing, and then if you have your own fiber processing and a circular economy, I would say for Hawaii, where you're using everything that you produce there, this is where you start helping the grower and helping your own infrastructure by doing your own processing, and then the farmer is the processor, and then you have someone that will take off the product you're producing. So herd is the easiest low-hanging fruit. Short fiber comes along with that herd. That's usually, there's different applications, of course, and that's where you see these price ranges that we're seeing across the country right now. But the price range is also has to do with quality factors, right? The quality of the herd, how clean it is. The short fiber is the same, and then long fiber, people really aren't touching that yet that I'm aware of, although people are on pilot scale looking at it and trying it. So grain processing, grain acres this year, I'm sure are going to be up from last year. There's tremendous pressure on hemp acres across the country. The last couple of years, all the prices were really high and inflated, and it was hard to get hemp grain acres grown. We're seeing anywhere from 55 cents to about 70 cents for conventional in most regions. And then, of course, organic, USDA certified organic, those are probably up around $1.25 or something, $1 to $1.25. And everybody wants organic, so that's really the sweet spot on the grain side.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Terry. So,
yep.
Hemp is very versatile, like Terry was saying, but you can't have everything sometimes. You have to really dedicate each grow to the end product. You have to start with the end in mind. So you want to decide what's the market, what's the hemp parts. So that's, for example, a long fiber. Here is a kind of a flow chart to show you how it can get processed with what kind of equipment, what kind of harvester. And then this is a very, very densely planted field, about 2 million plant per population. And then you have to find the right fiber variety that can really achieve the quality that you want. So for example, these are just the flow, the specialized harvester, the specialized fiber decorticators for longer fibers. But most of the market right now that we're seeing is really herd and shorter fibers. And this is most of the conventional large scale decorticator can achieve this. And people are harvesting with mowers, sickle bar mowers, 2-stage, 3-stage sickle bar mowers, because the length is not really the matter, right? It's really about the short fibers and the herd. And with these kind of planting, you can go lower, medium density planting population. And this is kind of geared towards our biomass fiber varieties. And of course, the last one is the flow chart is grain and dual purpose, is that finding a grain variety that works and planting it looser. And you often find grain varieties are a lot shorter than the fiber varieties, so that the harvester, the grain, the combine can actually reach the correct heights. And then another harvesting the stubble away to process for shorter fibers. So these are really kind of the general flow charts of each processing. And I think it's very important for growers to have this in mind too, before they even, to find the equipment that they should have and need. Decortication and infrastructure-wise, we were asked, and also looking at what's the difference between fixed and large-scale decorticators, and we happen to actually have sold both. So one of the mobile decorticator came from our KHS ZR2, which is a smaller fiber decorticator which I was showing. We sold it to Dr. David Shuchoff at NC State, that they actually bolted onto a trailer. And they actually did it's very great for their purpose. So you can find the strength and weaknesses of each part. The smaller one, the mobile one, definitely mobility, lower cost for the equipment, great for co-ops, more smaller scale farmers. And I think the weakness of that is definitely the lower output, the lower quality fibers you can get out of it, and you're really exposed to the elements. Whereas, the large scale decorticators, they're designed for large scale production, right? Standardized production, high capacity, lower unit cost, and then most importantly, the quality. But of course, it requires a lot of initial investment, a long setup period to really gear to tune up the machine, to tune up your internal operation. The labors, really a lot of labor is required, and definitely rigidity. It's not as flexible in terms of production. So really geared towards the people, the team in Hawaii. They should be able to really identify which one is better for what. But it's always good to start small. Start with a smaller pilot, with lower investment sometimes to really build up that market. Because if you are putting a big infrastructure and then the market's not there yet, and there's many cases that has happened in the early stage of fiber hemp, that a company went down even though they have a great vision and mission, but they're a little bit early. So really consider both and to make a decision in terms of processing infrastructure. And I think lastly, financial and support. Terry can talk briefly about financials.
Okay, am I muted or?
You're good.
Okay, yeah, so this is basically just kind of what we have seen in other areas. And I think the main thing you need to do is you need to look at economies of scale, and you need to think of what row crop hemp would follow, and you need to develop your input costs, right? We found that out very fast with Scotty, that the cost on that piece of ground is going to be, nothing like what we would see in other parts of the country, just because of the need for the amendments. So I would say on the herd fiber grain side, you have to want to grow hemp. You have to want to have a rotational crop. And the main thing with most of the areas of the country where hemp is taking off is people that have baling equipment, people that are already hay farmers, or else they're wheat farmers. So they have equipment that works. If you already have all the baling equipment, it's not that hard to run it through hemp. I mean, people don't like to do it. They're learning and all that. But at the same time, if you already have the equipment, and that's what you need to look at. What acres would these go to? And there's a lot of different ways you can play it. Because if you only want to have small 1-2 acre things and go for that biomass and those big 3-inch plants, with all that just pith herd built up, there are low cost ways to do that on small acreage, and you can get a tremendous return just for herd. But you'd probably be looking at rudimentary ways of doing things and just very raw material for, say, hempcrete kind of thing. But this is kind of what we're seeing as far as this sheet goes. And a lot of it is just basically, I would like to see anybody growing hay or anybody growing a grain crop. I'd like to see what all the input costs are per island or per region on an island. And then, plug that into a hemp to see what the input costs would be to grow an acre of hemp. And then also what kind of money you can expect on the other side, so you know what you're getting yourself into, and see if you have a profitable enterprise,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh. And I think a very good important disclaimer here is that this is a very rough estimates, because we haven't taken many costs of the equipment, this packaging equipment cost that was not really factored into it, additional labor. So this calculation of financial is really to show, processing greatly increases the value, and based on the value of the raw material, what can you expect in terms of revenue? And then the input cost really changes a lot of that. So you can definitely expect lower profit per acre in Hawaii, but really what it is yet for all of us to find out together. And that's what's included in the operational challenge of setting equipment up. And then of course the market challenge of what market is ready to buy these hemp products. And so every person on every island really requires a tailored solution for themselves if they want to get into fiber and green hemp. Is there anything to add, Terry?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. So yeah, it basically, again, if you have a, an economist working on other crops, and what I've seen so far, I've only been on Oahu, and all I've seen is, the kind of the main staple crops that you expect to see, and then very small vegetable farms, which are probably the highest return and probably the market you would want to target anyway. To do things small scale and just have another crop to grow in, maybe between, to break up a cycle of vegetables or something like that. But if you can scale, and we're talking 2,000, 5,000 acres, then you're going to need every bit of equipment, just like a large scale alfalfa farmer. I don't know if you're growing alfalfa, you're growing whatever you're using to feed cattle that isn't on pasture year round. That's the direction I would go with it. Yeah.
Thank you. So to summarize, I think we believe that hemp is viable for Hawaii. Absolutely. So it's a solution for Hawaii because of the need for domestic production, but it requires extensive agronomy trials, market data, processing technologies to be able to make it happen for the islands. And I think there's a big difference between Hawaii and the main states or mainland due to its unique climate, transportation costs, geographic conditions. So it's really have to be a tailored plan for the domestic market, for the needs, the strength, and the weaknesses. And so, we talked about a strategic approach to start smaller, to get more samples out there, to get the market interested before really scaling out. Work out the economics. If you can work out the economics on a smaller scale, then you can absolutely work out, you can be profitable at the large commercial scale. So I think that's summary from us. And a shameless plug here, we welcome to ourselves, we really welcome any inquiries or any questions just regarding fiber grain hemp and seeds and equipment. So we're always available for any questions. So thank you very much for having us. And this is your presentation.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Terry, and Scotty Wong, and your other industrial partners. So if there is no one to testify, so we would proceed to the discussion of these presentations, and I believe one of you would like to, Gail, you can start.
Did you call on Gail?
I thought you have something.
Oh, well, I did not raise my hand. I just put some comments
Okay.
in the chat box, but I don't mind going over them first. But first of all,
Anyway, if there's anyone who would like to, this open for discussion.
well, I would like to make a comment when we have a moment. Thank you.
Robert raised his hand. I don't know if you want Gail or Robert to go first.
Yeah, either.
I guess Gail, you were speaking. You can go ahead and speak first.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm not seeing the order here. It's probably the way I have my Zoom set up. So my apologies if I interrupted anyone. No, I was just going to say, first of all, thanks, Scotty. Thank you guys for the presentation. Obviously, a lot of us know a lot of this, but it's really great to have an experienced farmer. We always welcome farmers. It's a tough business. I think the only thing just to share with everyone is the fact that the hemp movement was pretty much grown from an organic regenerative movement, trying to look at what we could do differently from sugarcane in the early 90s. It was also born from just to remind everyone, from a food security movement, trying to look at like value added crops that could support food farmers in what they're doing. So as we move forward, I think it's just great to remember some of those roots. So I greatly appreciate the groundbreaking work you guys are doing in fiber over there. And I'm sure there's farmers that have grown some of this that'd be happy to share their experience. Thank you.
Thank you. I know someone else also had their hand raised, but I think they lowered it. Yeah, Robert, were you still wanting to speak? And so also just a reminder that anyone, if you're giving testimony, if you could please have your camera on.
Hello, it's Robert Benz, Hawaii Sustainable Farms. I have a limited bandwidth over here, so if it's okay to keep my camera off, but mahalo for the presentation. It's good to have Yuma here, and Scotty was absolutely correct on that idea for the grants. I think that's the best idea, because usually this is like called the green rush. It's like the gold rush. The people that really make money is the people that sell the Levi's jeans or the shovels. So it would be good if Hawaii had continue more Hawaii-based circular economy, where STEAM curriculum with the children, they can develop a lot of really amazing harvesting machinery. And like the hemp train, for example, I know that costs like $3 million, and a lot of people have had bad results with that. Also, hay isn't even organic hay isn't really viable over here, and that would be higher price. We got the fire on Maui, so the helicopters are fighting the fire. This is kind of the annual anniversary of the fire. It's traumatizing. We almost lost the whole farm to the fires. So I think focusing on the herd is the best we could do to help Hawaii farmers, because can remediate the land and also remediate the land and provide housing, and it's like old growth forest, so that CO2 collection and the precipitation connection. But at those numbers, it wouldn't pencil out even at the organic prices. Mahalo.
Thank you. Up next, Brittany Neal.
Aloha. I just wanted to add to the idea of hemp farmers needing access to more funding to help kind of get the industry going locally. And one thing I just wanted to mention is that if the state were to create grants to help hemp farmers with infrastructure, et cetera, I think to have no matching requirement would also be very helpful. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
There are no other hands raised.
So if there is no more discussion on this agenda, we will move to the next one. So our second to the last item is the updates from hemp consultant and the task force members. Before that, I request that the task force to limit their updates and open discussions to general fiber, fuel, building and grain food sectors, since we haven't had much time discussing these sectors. I would like to ask our consultants, Char and Megan Villa, to share the updates to the task force regarding general fiber, building grain food sectors. We only have 5 minutes left, so 10 minutes left. So Char, can you start?
There we go. Hello, I'm Char O'Brien, even though my name says Megan Vila on the thing. So we've been looking into the different types of infrastructure materials, particularly the hemp train. I visited both the hemp train and I've visited a European style. It's similar to the La Roche or crates in Holland. I'm surprised to hear that you say, Scotty or Robert, that people are upset with the hemp train, because I watched it operate. It looked amazing. Hemp Alta certainly leads the industry in processed herd and processed they've done a wonderful job at marketing all the things that come out of the hemp train. And what's amazing about it is that it comes out ready to use. So, of course, the fiber is not as high quality as some of the others. But of course, as Alex pointed out, they're starting out with that dual purpose hemp. So they're not getting the really good straw to begin with. And they are working on an insulation that can be made from that type of fiber. They're very close to making some sort of 4x8 sheet of panelized insulation. It's not the cushy stuff that the Europeans are making with the European style, but it's certainly adequate for Maui or for the rebuilding of Maui or anything on the Hawaiian Islands. The way we see it, the big low-hanging fruit is the herd for rebuilding of houses. We need 14,000 houses on Maui before the fires, and now, of course, it's more. And on every island, it's the same. We need housing. And the really important part of hemp, I believe, is prefabbed houses and also hemp blocks. And I know there are a few different types of hemp blocks out there. Some of them require additional structural use because they're not structural in themselves, but there is a new structural block that's coming on the market. Well, it's actually on the market now, almost there. The research has all been done. It's structural up to 4 stories without any additional vertical structure to it. So that's a real game changer. And that's coming out of the University of I think it's Montana. But anyways, it's going to revolutionize the building industry. So we would have both the possibility of building with hemp blocks and also with hempcrete in a form the way that Joe has done, or with a prefab form that you can then take the panels to wherever you need and put them up. So we will be coming up with our recommendations within a week. We'll have them on Monday to the DOA and DOH. And I guess you all will be voting on them on the 24th, as I understand, June. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Joe.
So we're also, yeah. Megan, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I've been speaking individually to many of you and had some really great conversations. So I just want to thank all of you that I have spoken to or been in touch with on the task force for giving me information. There are several of you that I've messaged several times and have not heard back from. So if for some reason you haven't received my email, I'll follow up again. But there are some of you that I'd still love to get some information from. There's a couple of things that are kind of still hanging out in the air that when I've heard feedback from some of you that I don't have kind of backup information. So I'd love to kind of be able to put certain things in the report to back up some of the things that were said. So if I follow up with you, I'd really appreciate you getting back to me because we're kind of coming to the tail end of us getting this report finalized, and I'd like to make sure that it can be as inclusive as possible. So I just really want to thank you all because you've given us some really valuable information, and I want you to know that you've been heard. And we've really got a lot of work to do. That's what I'm seeing, but I'm really inspired by what's already happening with the Scotties and Canada and what you guys are doing over there. And so I think that we can really grow this industry here, and it can really benefit our state in like so many different ways. So I just want to say thank you all for being in touch with me and speaking with me because I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, Char. So do we have any updates from the members? So if not, so our next meeting,
We have one raised hand.
we have one from the,
Oh, we have Robert raised his hand.
okay, sorry for that, Robert. Robert,
Hello, Marlo, Megan, and Char. I remember, I think it was maybe even the first meeting, there was a lot of things that was already dis decided that was in white that was already kind of said it was decided upon. Is it possible for like when are the task force members able to see the draft of the task force? I guess the task force report in regards of what kind of
Well, we're going to be making some high level recommendations from focused on what Act 263 has requested from us, which is primarily infrastructure. So at the next meeting, we're going to be going through what those are. And then you guys can decide to vote if you agree with them or if you don't. And then I think we move forward from there. And then the final report, I believe it's getting turned in the next few weeks. And then you guys will be able to review it and have pretty much the month of August to kind of collectively figure out what your feedback is and I guess make any changes or if you approve it or not, I believe. I think June can confirm that. But first, we're going to focus on the high level recommendations because this report is primarily focused on infrastructure. And we just want to make sure that we're able to pull out what the big things that we need are because if you put too many, there's lots of different feedback on lots of different aspects of this. But we need to stay focused and we need to put forward certain suggestions so that the legislature can see this kind of stuff in the fall. But in I believe the next meeting is the 24th, I think, is when we'll go through our recommendations. And then probably by the end of the month or very, very beginning of August is when you guys will, I think, get the final report. But I think June can confirm that.
Is there any?
I think Joe has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Thank everybody. I've actually been talking to Terry, and that's why I called you, Terry, inquiring about the seed that Scotty was using. She has left, but Janine was open to growing, and she has a industrial hemp license and a license to process industrial hemp. And I met her independent of this group through a series of events. But that's why I was calling you, Terry, to find out. You said you don't even have any of this seed available. Is that correct? Yuma.
Am I muted? No, I guess I was muted. We're at the end of the season, right? So we can get seed available and we can make seed available. But as far as planting directly, especially if you're going for a fiber crop, you're probably looking at for fresh seed. Alex, you can probably speak to this better than I, but I'm thinking you'd probably want to be planting in October or November if you're going mainly for fiber crop. To be determined, when your days are getting a little bit longer. But we do have some seed available, but we'd rather have fresh seed available. We're at the end of the sales cycle, right? I mean, if you think of Northern Hemisphere and most plantings being from March, maybe February, March, majority of the plantings are going May and June. So, we're at the end of the sales season, so it's pretty slim pickings on inventory.
Okay, and then one other thing, I know that you're running out of time, and I don't know if we could have this conversation outside of this group, but she's talking about, and she is gone, I see her picture there, but I tried to see if she was here, of using lights. And I know about some guys on Kauai who were builders over there doing testing and using lights and increasing the light that they're exposed to. What you guys have any information about that?
I mean, I can speak to that a little bit. I would think that the more inputs you add, the more it doesn't make any sense. I've seen people do that in Colorado with CBD, with solar collectors and big stadium lights and all that. Like, say you're broke down the field and you bring in a trailer that's got a bunch of lights on it that makes it like daylight or like construction for road construction at night, that kind of thing. But all you need to do is break that cycle. So any little bit of light could affect that. But I would think that if anything, you'd want to avoid that. You just want to find the times of the year that you can get a good fiber crop and have less to deal with, you know.
That's the long season.
Yeah.
But Joe, we can also, we can work with you to make sure with your schedule, we understand your schedule to figure out the best time of seed for you, or if you need herd specifically, we can also help you. So anything, let us know. Yeah.
Okay. I have your number, Terry.
Right.
And thank everyone for what you're doing here.
Thank you.
I guess next we'd like to call up Grant Overton, please.
Hey everyone, I'm joining from my phone, so you'll have to excuse me, there'll be no video for me today. To chime in on the seed conversation, we've worked extensively with genetics, as many of the other farmers on HHFA have since the 2018 pilot program started. What we have found definitively is that you're looking for type 4 autophotoperiodic plants with a sex ratio skewed to about 90% females, with humidity and pest resistance that needs to be ground acclimated in Hawaii or a subtropical region between the Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn. Higher preference for something that aligns between 23 and 23 south and north respectively. A lot of the fiber cultivars, including Yuma, you have to do development work to get them there. Field emergence is going to be a huge problem because of seed quality. There is significant amount of genetics work that's done proprietarily that I think anybody on HHFA that's grown can speak to. I'm speaking purely towards seed and fiber production, particularly for biomass yield. The reason I bring up autophotoperiodism and the reason I bring up the controls for sex ratios is pretty straightforward. The number of females you have in the field determines the absolute seed output because males don't produce anything of value. Fiber contents can be relatively the same. Cultivating this crop for a full biomass potential, on the low end, we've seen alignments directly with what Dr. Lee's original testing from CTAR got. And again, on the low end, 35 dry matter tons per acre, combined leaf and fiber yield per acre per year. This is anecdotally gone much higher. So I do caution it's incredibly hard to work with the cultivars that we're talking about today. Certainly the development for this industry has gone quite a bit since 2018. So I'd encourage everyone to look into genetics providers and see if they align with what their goals are. For cannabinoids, you're going to want to look for type 4 CBG cultivars. That's where the market's moving. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Next we had Gail with her hand raised.
Oh, yeah, aloha. Yeah, I was just gonna tell Mr. Smith that we've got quite a bit of Yuma left. If we might be able to give it to you, but I don't know what the germination is on that. You probably have to do some germination tests on it. We've got bags sitting around in our refrigerator for a reason. You're welcome to it.
Okay, thank you, Gail. How can I get a hold of you?
I'll put my phone number in the chat, and anyone who wants to is also welcome to always contact us as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
You can do this.
Just you're fine. Yeah, you can go ahead. Is there anyone who would like to add to the discussion? If not, so again, Char mentioned already that our next meeting is on Wednesday, July 24, 2024. So they're going to present their findings and recommendations, as well as, any proposed legislation. So if there is no objection, we will now adjourn the meeting. So this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Mahalo.
Mahalo.